I've had the pleasure many times of speaking about the different generations. I love that I got caught on the spot there about the new generation. And with absolute respect and humor, we're still trying to figure out the latest generation, let alone this next generation. And if some of you in this room are wondering what is the next generation, and today's not too much about it because we're gathering the data now, if any of you have children who are in high school or about to come into high school, and you are absolutely stunned by the avalanche of technology and the tablets and the screens and what they do now when they're on their screens, that is what they call the next generation coming up. And some of you probably think back and roll your eyes and think, well, back in the day, we didn't have. But truly, I know every generation has said that, but this generation coming up, they'll be fascinating. However, today in this brief presentation, I'm just going to talk to you about, you can kind of see on the slide up here, that there is really, for all of you in this room, no matter what you do, and I think I heard that there's employers, there's healthcare providers, there's probably leaders in the room, owners of organizations. No matter what, if you're any one of those categories or anybody in this room, there is the world that you're playing in, which I call your sandbox. And it's different because we've never seen this before. And so what I just want to talk to you about, and I thought it was absolutely so serendipitous that Diana talked about this. She talked about change. And truly, that's what I'm going to talk about today. So a couple of things. One is, we do a lot of work on how the impact, the choices that behaviors, choices that leaders make, choices that staff make, choices that your customers make, how that impacts success. Now, you can take the word success out and put, I don't know, back to work, back to health, staff satisfaction, profitability, doesn't matter to me. But for this presentation, and I'm going to kind of shoot myself in the foot, all I'm going to do is tell you that change is a-coming. And it's not based upon Shane Jensen and his great team. Now, there's times where our company, where I'll speak on lots of things that we do, and you can be like, meh, he's kind of boring, I'm not going to listen. Or that's not relevant to us. But this presentation today is not based upon some brilliant thing that I thought of, or a case of School of Hard Knocks or 5 steps to success. It's just a simple reality that I had the pleasure and the pain of experiencing with my clients. I literally woke up in the middle of the night 10 years ago. I was like, ooh, this is coming. Parts of me sometimes want to cross that change ahead, put an X through it and say it's here. So just note that, in the spirit of openness, that this presentation is a reality check, and whether we like it or not, it's a-coming. And as Diana and a couple of other people already said to me, if you look around this room, now carefully don't make eye contact, because it makes people a bit awkward, just try to figure out how old everyone is. Okay? Just think about it. I'm sure some of you look at some people that you work with, or some of your clients that walk in the door, and you're like, are you even old enough to have a driver's license? Or with respect, some of you are looking at some of the people you work with, or your clients, and you're like, could be my grandfather. And how about when you're kind of stuck in the middle? And you've got somebody that you swear is best friends with your son, because that's how young they are, and then you look to your right to the other person on your team, and you're like, Grandpa? That is what we're dealing with. Never before have we seen such a shift in demographics. So this lyrics behind me, who do you think wrote those lyrics? Did I hear a Bob out there? Could you stand up who said Bob Dylan? Where is it? Could you stand up? And this stand up. Could you stand up? So just look at their age. It's a lovely age. You can sit down. So Bob Dylan wrote this. Now, my father was a lawyer. He passed away a couple years ago, conservative. Put it this way, in 1965, my dad was 25. Okay, right out of law school, loving life. And so, obviously to my baby boomers in the room, if I'm correct, Bob Dylan was the poet of your generation. He captured succinctly what you went through. I think even you people, gave him a Nobel laureate the other day, which is absolutely hilarious because guess what the average age is on the Nobel Laureate Council? Baby boomers. Same age as Bob Dylan. So when I was building this presentation, our computers crashed. And I had to go down to my dad's law firm. This is about 8, 9 years ago. And I had thought this song was perfect because it captured where we are today. But of course I have to quote it, and so I'm trying to figure out, and I'm Googling it in my father's office, and my dad comes up behind me in his suit, and my father was conservative and a bit of a traditionalist. And he sees me Googling, right away he's wondering what Google is back then. I don't get into it, but I'm like, Dad. And then he sees the screen pop up with the lyrics. And right away, how many of you work with baby boomers? They do love to talk, don't they? They do love to tell you about the way it was, the things they have done, and rightfully so. Baby boomers have kicked ass. So my father just shifts gears. Well, son, Bob Dylan, he And I'm like, Dad, I hear you. But Dad, I have a problem. I said, I'm trying to figure out when the heck this song was written. I need to not plagiarize, I need to post it. I said, some people say 68, 64, 67, it's all over the place. And my father, a child of the 60s, who never really spoke about it, this one time and one time only, I hear him standing behind me. All he says was, things were a little hazy back then, son. And then he walked out the door to my father. But I love it. So if we fast forward today, we are dealing with a multi-generational workforce. We are dealing with multi-generational clients. We are dealing with multi-generational employees that we have to work with and lead and engage. And you know what's hilarious? I used to do this presentation all around how can we get people to work? What is the secret solution? But more and more, and I changed this whole presentation 1.5 to 2 years ago, because you know what was happening? Great people like yourselves, including me, were like, oh, I can see how old you are. You're like this. Yeah. Never put your phone down. Always like to talk. Don't understand technology. Resistant to change. I was like, all of a sudden I'm realizing that half the battle that we create for ourselves as practitioners or employees or leaders in this room is we create the story in our head, and then the moment we walk in and see the client or our employee or our fellow employees, we're like, you're a write-off. You're like this. And sometimes when I start, we do, careful how I say it, we do workplace investigations. We do large-scale change projects. And every time, it was the same thing. I'm like, why did you say that or think that? And they're, well, because they're like this. So I started researching, and sure enough, look at this slide. We have this credible story in our head around generations. And of course, we've all heard of Gen Y, haven't we? Or the millennials. Some of you in this room might be millennials, and you're like, here we go again. Here we go again. But no wonder my phone, proverbial phone, never stops ringing around Shane, help us understand. Look at this. This is a latest article from CBC. Just last year, I pulled it, ironically, for a WorkSafe piece. Look at this. Lazy millennial bull haters may be hurting big cereal's bottom line. To my older people in this room, you can't read the finer print. 40% of young adults say cereal is too much work. And we're like, yeah, that is so Gen Y. That is so them. What's incredible is when I did the research behind this, because it just flashed up, was Gen Y actually are not lazy. They don't just be like, oh my God, I got to pull a bowl of cereal and bring it over to the sink. Instead, they actually want to get up and get out the door and get to work quicker. They have actually Googled on their phone rush hour, figured out exactly the quickest route, and then if they leave at X amount of time, they can get to work quicker and avoid that and grab their pre-ordered Starbucks latte, sync with their blue phone, and chat away while they're driving. And they just can't wait till that self-driving car happens so they can do more. So they eat a cereal bar. But you know what? The media loves this. So they don't tell you this, do they? But this is a perfect example that this trickles into our workplace, this belief. And then we're suddenly like, really? You're on my team? Really? You're one of those? So what I want to do is kind of debunk that myth, but obviously recognize that there is differences. But let me just summarize it all before I shift gears. With humor and respect. Whether you like what I'm saying today or not, whether you say to yourself, meh, or you're like, wow, no matter what, you won't hurt my feelings. But let me say this to all of you in this room. A change is a-coming. And I didn't plant Diana's speech when she went through those technological changes and I had nothing to do with that. It was amazing. I'm like, this is the best opening ever. So on that note, heads up, just be aware, because as Bob Dylan says, you're going to sink like a stone if you don't change, and you will not have any choice. So consider this. Consider why I'm so excited but a little bit nervous. Look at this stat. This is Canadian. All my stuff is basically Canadian stats because I believe it's most relevant for us. We are, whether we like it or not, a top-heavy society. The majority of people in Canada are baby boomers. Think about that. We have also been conditioned in our workplace, in our healthcare practices, in our business models, to market and cater to the baby boomers because they were the largest demographic group. Now, I use the word they in there in case you caught that. They have the most money. They have a tremendous amount of influence. Think about it. They, for some of you in this room, are probably your bread and butter clients. But they're retiring in waves. And it is creating havoc in the workplace. And from a business model perspective, how do we tap into this? But look at this. And I update this like every 6 months because the stuff keeps coming out. What I am showing you here simply is this. I am showing you stats, information, to again reinforce the simple fact that change is upon us and we have to do something about it. Now look at this one. I could summarize this really quickly. We're not having enough sex. We're not. Or we're not having enough kids. And the question is why? Where did we go from this huge group of people, which we call our baby boomers, to the fact now that we kind of wake up, we're like, wow, how did we get to these differences? So I get asked this question all the time. So let's have our first history exam. Let's see, some of you, did you sleep during history class? Were you awake? Okay. So I want you to think about, we're going to go through a timeline. Just think about where you were born. Think about how you were raised. Think about geopolitics. Think about disasters, war, famine, technological changes, the way your parents thought you should be, and think how much that being raised that way influences how you interact with your clients, that is your customers, your fellow employees, or if you're a leader in this room, how you choose to lead your people. Okay, first question, 1939 to 1945, what happened? That was quick. World War II. So, again, very respectfully, technically, we win the war. But let's give a moment of thought, consideration that there's a tremendous amount of loss on both sides. Again, I'm not going to get into that, but I just want to acknowledge that for a lot of you in this room, your great-grandparents, or your parents, or your great-great-grandparents won the war. Now, we all know what a stressful day or a stressful week of work can be like. We all know what that's like. And we all know it at the end of a long week of stress, especially if we're in our, 20s, what we like to do on Friday night. We like to let loose. We like to have fun. We like to have a few drinks or go out and socialize. Can you imagine? Now think about this. The average man and woman that went to war returned home around the ages of 23 to 26. That's a lot of stress. It's a lot of pent-up stress. Now, imagine you come home from war after 5 to 6 years, and they partied super hard. Did you know that? They were the traditionalists. So what do you hope happens to you after a night of partying, my 20-year-olds? What are you kind of hoping might just happen at the very end of the night as you stagger out of the bar or the last social scene? Get hooked up. Now cover your ears if this makes you squeamish. Your great-grandparents or parents did a lot of hooking up, okay? They did not, it was incredible. And that explosion Maybe explosion isn't the best word, but was the legendary baby boomers. So if you're like, where do these amazing baby boomers come from? Why do we have such a massive demographic group? This is why. Traditionalists did not need Viagra, okay? They had it down. So let's get into biology briefly. So you have this massive group of young kids, the baby boomers, and they get into their peak productivity cycle when technically a species should reproduce equal amount to ensure success of the next generation, but somebody invented something that put the nail in the coffin of the demographics. What do you think it was? A lot of women said that. Yes, it was the birth control pill. You know what's hilarious? Is a man invented it. Go figure. Which speaks to that world back then. So this was the first nail in the coffin of why we're in such a huge change piece. All of a sudden, and my mother, alive today, a baby boomer, just turned 73, so on the kind of on the near end of it, was from a small town of Clearwater. Anybody know where Clearwater is? Yes. I love it. So the reason I say Clearwater and a shout out is it was a conservative mining logging town. And my mother said to me, Shane, because she came and watched me do this presentation, she said, you nailed it. That birth control pill changed everything. Because back then, we as women were expected to, what time do you think a woman should have been married by back then? Totally. And how many kids did a woman need to have by the time she was 21, 22, back in the 50s? 5, mostly, let's hope. How many of you remember great-grandparents? They're like, well, when I was a kid, we had 7 siblings. Some of you are like, 7, I can barely handle 1. But my mother said it changed it all. So that's your beginning of pushing back. So then we obviously move into, and some of you were born around here as well, is people are like, no. And the 60s movement came in. We saw that whole piece happen. Women become more and more what we call liberated, what we call the feminist movement, the pushback, which was great. But what it did, and again, I'm not here to weigh, I'm just here to point out the facts. All of a sudden, men and women are both working. And we all know this, when both of you are working 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, which suffers? Sex. And of course, you're like, well, we can't have 6 kids. We can't have 5 kids. Then we get into the 70s and 80s. How many of you were born after 1970? Start thinking about that. Remember us, fellow Gen Xers? 1979 to 1980. Anybody own a house back then? Anybody own a house from 79 to 83? Same Bob Dylan person? I can guarantee you in this room, if you own a house right now, if you rounded that decimal point up, you'd be single digits. 3%, 4%, maybe 5%. 1979 to 1983, what was the mortgage rate or interest rate? To my young men and women in the room, can you imagine your fixed 5-year mortgage rate is up for renewal, and you walk down to the bank, and they tell you it's 18%? Remember that time, Gen Xers? When our parents went through that, divorce rate tripled, unemployment spiked. Huge impact on size of families. The last thing we're going to have when we're facing 18% mortgage rates is kids, or lots of kids. Then we got into the Cold War, moved into the 90s. Look at the birth rates. 1.5 in the 90s. This is my generation. To my Gen Xers in the room, this is our peak reproductive cycle time. We're in our 20s now in the 90s. We should be having lots of kids, but we're not. You want to know why? Here's one great example. My father, a baby boomer, says, son, you need to go to school and get a degree. I'm like, why? Because that's the secret to success in life. Get educated. I'm like, okay, so Gen X, remember back then in the 90s? You'd go to university, you'd do a degree in English, psychology, sociology, history, and the smart people did the sciences. Remember that? What an absolute useless degree. So much so, I graduated from the University of Victoria. Get this, and I know I'm dating myself. I graduated from the University of Victoria in 1995 with a $30,000 student debt. Got a job at Earl's for $3.25 an hour. Because who had all the jobs? Baby boomers. Listen, the X are just yelling it out. Baby boomers. What's the last thing I'm going to be having if I have a $30,000 student debt and I'm making 3 sex? No, I'm trying to have lots of sex, but... You guys like the sex thing, I can see that. Truly though, think about that. And some of you in this room, you can relate to that story. You're like, dude, the last thing I'm going to be having is kids when I got to pay down my debt, try and buy a house, get a career underneath my feet, and those bloody boomers just don't want to die. They just they're incredible. They just keep chugging along. So then we get to today. Another shout out to the women. Okay? They're like, you know what? I'm not going to have kids till I'm in my 30s. I'm going to wait longer. I'm going to continue to get educated. I'm going to kick ass again. We had that little bump. Does anybody around remember 2008 what happened? Boomers don't like it. Sweat breaks on their brow because that's when we had the stock market crash. Guess whose portfolio was hammered? Freedom 55 dream went out the road. Okay? Think about 2008. It was huge. So all of a sudden now, when we could have had a lot of baby boomers in a really good way, win-win, retiring, they're like, no, got to work a bit longer. So this is where we are today. And what's hilarious is we're actually going to have a skilled labor shortage. What's hilarious is we're now playing with a sandbox filled with basically 4 generations and this new generation coming up. And whether you like it or not, this is our world. And where you were born and raised has a direct impact on how you're going to navigate this world. And I call it the Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I love this because people are always like, no, Shane, it won't impact me. I'm like this. I've been doing it. And then they say this, I've been doing it this way for a while. I know what's going on. And right away I'm like, uh-oh. Change is a-coming. And if some of you are like, no, 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 I'm like, really? Let me show you all something. Everybody take your hands out and put them on the table like this. I'm just going to show you something. Just fascinating. Put your hands on the table. Okay? When I say go, you're going to do something for me. Are you ready? When I say go, you're going to grab your cell phone and hold it above your head. And I'm going to time you. Ready? 1, don't be shy. 1, 2, 3, go. I could leave now. We're done. Here's fascination for you. 99% of you in this room had a cell phone out in less than 2 seconds. And you're a multi-generational group. Tell me again, why do you need your cell phone 2 seconds away from your hip? Tell me. You can't. We all got our stories. And hey, to my Gen Ys in the room, and some of your Xers, I know you. You could look at me right in the eye, couldn't you? And you could write a dissertation under the table with one hand on your palm. We've all got our little tricks. My point of that fun activity, because we do a big thing on distractions in the workplace and da-da-da-da-da, is that just about every age group in the room are just like, boom, boom. It's like the hand actually feels good, doesn't it, when you get it back? It just feels normal. It feels relaxing. So when I ever get an individual, man or woman, any age, like, no, Shane, I don't need my cell phone. I'm like, you know what the first stage of addiction is? Denial, isn't it? So this is your client. This is your workplace. These are your employers. These are your customers. I love it. But we have to be open to change. And one of the ways we can do it, and there's lots of things that all of you can do, and I'm just here to talk to you about a little sliver of the pie. But think about it from diversity and generational diversity. And think about how each of you were raised, how that influences, ready, here it comes, your attitude. I know you're all technically brilliant. I know that some of you could tell me how great you are. Tell me how long you've been doing it, how many cases you've worked, how many people you've got back to work, especially my baby boomers. Because rightfully so. But here it comes. It's kind of irrelevant. Don't get me wrong, it's super important. But this whole piece, what they call like emotional intelligence, soft skills, building relationships, trust, earning respect, connecting, that is where the next differentiation is in the marketplace. It is. Think about it. So think about how events, economy, culture influence you. Have fun with me up here today. Some of you might want to throw something at me. But think about how you were raised. Think about how that impacts you, your resistance to technology, or your ability to embrace technology, your attitude when you see a young man or an older woman. Because somewhere in there you fit, and this is unreal. So just take a look. There's lots of different shifts around this. Our company did our research. We do a couple longitudinal studies, and these are the numbers we use. So just take note where you fit. You can lie. If you want to feel younger today, just be like, oh no, I'm an Xer. I'm a Gen X. If you have kids, you might be wondering about this. So, yes, there is 4 generations. But again, it's not so much about the dates, and I kind of talked about that. What's fascinating to me, and I did that historical timeline, is that certain things went on in our society that directly put us into groups. And if you're like, huh? I'm like, who here remembers life before Google? Okay? Who remembers MSN Messenger? Remember that? Chuckle, chuckle. Okay? Remember the pager? Huh? Remember we thought it was cool to have a pager clipped? You felt like you were somebody. Okay? And some of you in this room are like, pager? Seriously? I saw that in the Modern Museum of Met. Totally. Pre-97 was before the internet. If any of you have ever done graduate work before the internet and after, can you imagine what it would be like? To everybody in this room that's a little bit older and being respectful, to my Gen Xers, my baby boomers, can you imagine going to high school and having the internet at your fingertips? Or this thing called the smartphone? Think about that. Now my Gen Y in the room, they're like, huh? What? They slowly grab their phone and just nurture it. Is he talking about no phone? Don't take away my phone. What I love is there's much diversity in this world. And obviously there are some common themes, and you'll see it very quickly here. But I can't help but notice that because I'm a Gen Xer, there's certain things around my generation that I can identify with. And for the baby boomers in the room, I know there's certain things that you guys and you ladies can relate to. And to my Gen Y, we're still trying to figure it out. But you are very different in a great way, and you'll be pleased as punch to know that I'm a champion of Gen Y, because they are today's reality. So just think about it from that perspective. So let's look at the 4 groups and have a bit of fun, a bit of humor. But again, think about one of the major premises of this presentation. Whether you like it or not, the times they are a-changing. And I'm pretty confident that every one of you in this room have stumbled, metaphorically, because you resisted change. You have. It could be anything at any stage in your career or your professional or your personal lives. What I'm going to say to you again in an absolute great way, this is a tsunami. It is coming, and I know you see it. And I'm just going to shout out to my new best friend, Diana. Okay? She gave you the heads up. What's fascinating, if you ever get a chance, ask WorkSafe BC stats people how top-heavy they are. How many baby boomers do they have versus younger people? In your municipal, in your government, in your large, it's incredible. Okay, traditionalists. With much, much respect, I'm not going to spend hardly any time. And I mean that, and there's no joke there. Because they're pretty much, with respect to being a powerful labor force, they're no longer there. But they're still with us, in our society, in our culture. I'm imagining that many of you in this room have the honor and the pleasure of working with this amazing group. But from a labor perspective, they're no longer there. But what I love to do is let me remind all of you about this group. And to my baby boomers in the room, you know this. Remember those stories about walking backwards 20 kilometers to school with no socks, uphill twice? Guess what generation did it? Guess what generation survived the 30s? And you know what celebration and relief was? Get on a ship and go to war. Pretty intense. So I think that group gets a great shout out. Here's really something that's fascinating. To my baby boomers in the room, you know this, but to my Gen Xers and my millennials, there's a reason why baby boomers kick ass, work 60 hours a week, work hard, take pride, resistant to change, dig deep, tell you to suck it up, because guess who raised them? And with amazingness and respect, this group did suck it up. And they bestowed that onto their boomers. So it's a beautiful, fascinating thing. But if you're like, why are the boomers like this? They got to chill out. I'm like, there was no chill out. Makes sense. Now you can be like, okay, now I'm a little bit more forgiving or compassionate or understanding or more patient. It doesn't matter to me. But the flip side is those last 5 or 6 words I just said there, it's what screws us up. Can't connect with the client. Client doesn't buy in. Can't build a relationship. Just think about that. So, to the traditionalists. Now let's get to the bread and butter. Baby boomers, they're all like, yes, that's us. Which again, let me make this very clear. I'm a strong supporter of the baby boomers because they've done just about everything you can think of. I love this, the aging hipsters. What's fascinating is I've been doing this work for 10 years now, and really the last couple of years it's like all over the media. I think it's great because the change is a-coming. This is just in the Globe and Mail. So when I said to all of you, 15 minutes ago I think, I said, you know what? It's up to you in a really good way. Because today is not a 5-step model to success. Okay? Today is about, hey everybody, no matter what you do, no matter how old you are, no matter what your business model is, or how you get your customers to buy in and listen, or market, or lead, you probably want to pay attention. Because it's going to touch every facet of your lives, and already you can see it. So that's why I pulled this quote from the Globe and Mail, because they did this massive media thing around this. Because they too see it. They're like, wow, this is going to infiltrate every aspect of our society. So just notice this. Now, the baby boomers are very different than the traditionalists. Everything that you are sitting on, wearing, holding, using, eating, came from the boomers. Now, we could argue a bit about that, but there's a reason why this group is so proud and noble and love to tell you how great they are. Because they have done just about everything. And when you think about how the traditionalists raised them, it makes total sense. So what we do see a lot in the workplace or with our customers is they're today's leaders, extremely strong work ethic. They are ready to retire, some of them. And I love this. I'm from Kamloops. So we have a small office here, and we have an office in the Kamloops area because I founded the company from there. How many golf courses do we need in Kamloops? How many golf courses do we need overall in our society? Tell me something. We know this, ironically, with this group, that unless you have your leg cut off, the last thing you're going to do is go up to a hospital, to emergency. Because why? Why is our healthcare overflowing? Who's overflowing it? The boomers. Who is driving the need for golf courses? The boomers. And you know what's great about the boomers, and I love this? Unlike the traditionalists, they're going to pay to play. They're going to get knee surgery, hip surgery, shoulder surgery, ankle surgery. They're going to invest a fortune into healthcare so they can play. Think about that. They are such a switched on, powerful, smart, and influential group that they're like, there is no way I'm going to exit stage right from my career and go die. I am going to have a heck of a lot of fun. I'm going to hang with my grandkids and their grandkids, hopefully. I'm going to golf, travel. I'm going to do a tremendous amount of physiotherapy and health and exercise because I'm an ass kicker. But we've been doing it our way for a long time, so make sure when you work with me or talk to me or engage me that you understand that I'm as proud as a peacock, and rightfully so. So when we're communicating with boomers, this is fascinating. Remember what I said to all of you? I could draw a line right down the middle of all of you. And half of you, I guarantee, you could tell me how technically brilliant you are in your education and your skills and how good you are with process and diagnosing and coming up with a work health plan and return to work. I love it. That's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm curious though, how are your soft skills? Can you connect with people? Can you earn their respect, trust? Do you listen? Do you build relationships? Do you deal with conflict? Do you hold people accountable? How do you create behavior change? All of that comes from here, which for a long time we didn't need. But I'm going to show you in a bit why. So understand this. The boomers, rightfully so, are very proud. And they want that respect. Make time to listen. We do not remember those who spoke. Ironically, I'm speaking. We remember those who listened. We all are like that. We're like, you know what? That guy was really nice. That woman was amazing at that party. And somebody say, like, why? Well, she listened. When she spoke, she actually asked me questions. Relationship. And if someone listens, I guarantee it's easier to create change. So, face-to-face. This is a sticking point. We are moving more faster and faster to productivity and effectiveness. How quickly can we get the message out? And sometimes the boomers like it, but they sure love the face-to-face. Technology is great. To all my boomers in the room, you all grabbed your phones. It's wonderful. But I think that there is a huge future for all of you in this room if you can find the sweet spot between technology and old school with respect to boomers. And because we're so quick to pick up the latest technology and use it, some of the boomers are like, what's going on here? I'm not connecting here. I don't see the point of this. Can't we just sit down and connect? So just think about it. It's an opportunity. So think about multiple mediums. I know that work's safe because I've done this before with all of you. You're doing technology. You're doing fast. I had the pleasure of speaking to a big conference, and they're the work safe inspecting officers. They went out into the field, and they were all carrying tablets. But we also work for a bunch of construction firms. And the old construction baby boomers are like, why are they showing up with tablets? I don't understand. Whatever happened there? Just hand me a piece of paper. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is perfect. And this is a tough piece. Again, maybe none of the baby boomers in this room fall into this category, but our research is very strong around this. There's a resistance to change, so heads up on that. Spend a bit more time creating the value proposition. It's a whole other conversation. Try and do it with the littlest amount of technology, and chances are you might be in a better place than you were before. Okay, to my Gen Xers in the room. Aw. That is so us. Do you see that, what is that little square black thing in the far left there? What is that? Millennials, do you know what that is? That's a cassette tape. We were purging our house the other day and my daughter found one in the case. She couldn't open it. Remember how tricky those bloody things were? Who here drives a car that has a cassette case deck in it? Let alone a disc or a CD player. But that was us. We were right in the middle. But you remember what I said? Now, let me check the time. 35 minutes ago. It's hilarious how media brands, isn't it? This is called a magazine. They were really popular once. Some of them haven't got the message yet, but so be it. Look how they labeled us Gen Xers back in 1990. It's hilarious. It is so inaccurate and so wrong that I don't even like to pull this slide up. But remember I said to you one of the key takeaways is we're so quick to judge. So before there was millennials, who seem to be the doom and gloom generation that we're doomed because they won't be able to look after us. They don't have a work ethic and all that other crazy stuff. Before you millennials, don't be too upset because guess what they called us? Slackers. Remember that, Xers? Remember Sesame Street? MTV? Game Boy? First computers? And of course, divorce rate tripled. There's a reason why Gen X are so savvy, so switched on, and can bridge both sides. So right away, if I have a business model, I'm trying to engage people, I know Gen X is very different because of their experiences. They can bridge it perfectly. But I also know they're not going to retire anytime soon, that most of them have been around now. So I'm going to confess my age. I'm 47 years old. I don't plan to retire anytime soon. I'm very hardwired to the internet, but I remember the old days. So I'm very careful. I've seen it all. And sometimes I see my clients, maybe some of you in this room, that miss that. So it's all about a bit of respect, but you have to prove yourself because I'll just Google it. I've seen it before. And I've seen the old way and the new way, so it's kind of a neat place. We're also becoming a very powerful group because we know change. We have kids. We're in our peak productivity income years. Great marketing opportunity. And we're very conscious of our health because now, unfortunately or fortunately, we're getting a bit older. Hey, Xers? And here's the kicker. We are very busy because we are those kind of helicopter parents, aren't we? We pick our kids up and we drop our kids off. We pick our kids up and we drop our kids off. Don't we? And heaven forbid if we can't reach out to them. But the other thing too is we're looking after our parents now, some of us. So when I walk into a healthcare practitioner's office or into the bank or anything and they're like, Shane, you have to book ahead and you have to do this and you have to spend 30 minutes doing this and filling out this form, I'm like, are you absolutely serious? I don't have time. Market to me on the relationship piece and respect where I am, and chances are I'll give you my business. Think about it. And it's only going to get crazier. Gen Y. Any Gen Ys in the room? Put your hands up. Be proud. No. Put your hands up. Like, stretch it out. Okay? Look at that. Amazing group. Absolutely amazing group. Some of you in this room, that's the age of your kids. Some of you in this room, that's the age of your grandchildren. Some of you in this room, you're leading them. Some of my Gen Ys in the room, you're leading other ones. Very interesting time, isn't it? I love this group. Unfortunately, the media loves this group. They can't get enough of them. So with humor. But the problem for me now is, and this is where I've reorientated this presentation over the last couple of years, is this is showing up in workplace practices. Not them doing that. Well, sometimes they might, but. So like, that's what they're like, so I'm going to treat them this way. I'm going to create this whole story in my head, and then I'm going to treat them this way. And I'm like, very powerful question to use in yourself. Is it a fact or a belief? And when I come in and work with teams and groups and leaders and do stuff, and they have these crazy stories, I'm like, just out of curiosity, Mr. Smith, is that a fact or a belief? Is that because you saw that CBC thing? And they're just a bunch of, they're so lazy they can't even eat cereal? Or did you actually figure it out? Because this group is amazing. Unfortunately, the media doesn't care. Because if it bleeds, it leads. and again, I'm speaking from experience, it's not my first rodeo, this stuff is making its way into organizations and how we engage with our customers. And if you're like, what? Let me read the finer print here. Ready? This again is called a magazine. They still haven't taken the hint. Okay, but look at this. Time. The me generation. Here we go. Millennials are lazy, entitled, narcissistic, who still live with their parents. That is not helpful. It's not. Here's the kicker. Remember I said a change is a-coming? Remember I said that? Last year, the demographic clock ticked over. Baby boomers, rightfully so, had all the power. And I mean that in a good way. They were the largest labor group, the largest customer group. They were huge and powerful. And last year, they lost the crown. And unfortunately, Gen Xers blew right by us again. We're always in the wake of the boomers. Think about this. If there was one slide today, one slide, that I could say to all of you in this room, if you could take one slide away, it would be this. Everything from this is your future and today's reality. This is who you will be speaking to. If any of you plan to work for another 5 years or more, you should really start thinking about, wow. Wow, this is the group. Now, don't get me wrong, the boomers are amazing. But if we focus on the boomers, because they're very different potentially in how we want to engage them, get buy-in, interact with them, give them information, it's going to be very different than this group. And this group is huge, and you think Gen X are ruthless? 3 clicks. You ever hear that expression? If they can't get what they want in 3 clicks, they're like, meh, moving on. Think about that. Think about how that impacts your ability to engage, connect, market, and get buy-in from this group. And are you still using processes, methods, technology, paperwork that was defined and built and designed for the boomers or even the Xers? Because remember, we can go both ways, us Xers. This group, they're like, dude, what century are you from? Why would I even come here? The only reason I'm here is because my mother threatened me. Because when I Googled you, there was really nothing. And there was no reviews. There was nothing. Because why? Look at this. Can you imagine my Xers and boomers in the room having 24/7 access to the world today when we were young? How much that would influence you? Think about it. No wonder Gen Y is there. People I'm like, are you crazy? Who bought them? No, hang on a second. Who bought Wi-Fi into the house? Your little Gen Y kids? Okay? Or you parents? It's okay, you can admit it. We scream bloody murder about cell phones and Gen Y and technology. I'm like, well, hang on a second. Why do houses have 5 to 7 tablets now? My wife's with the school district. You know what she said? I said, sweetheart, I don't understand why cell phones are allowed in schools. They are nothing but problems. She rolled her eyes and she said, you know why there's cell phones in schools? You think it was the teachers that allowed it or the parents? Can't hear you, parents. Don't be shameful. Parents went bloody crazy when they first banned cell phones in school. Because why, parents? I can't hear you. Just shout it out. I need to get a hold of Jimmy. I need to know Jimmy is, ironically, safe. So when we judge Gen Y, I'm like, well, hang on a second. When in doubt, they're going to Google. By the way, they've Googled every one of you if they're working for you. They know everything about you they could, and they'll keep a straight face. And remember I made that joke and so many of you started chuckling? Who picked them up and dropped them off? Who made sure they had everything? Why? Have you even noticed that if you trip in a race, you get a ribbon? Have you noticed, everybody, that when your kid back in the day, remember, they came home with a little piece of artwork, and you'd look at it and you'd be like, my kid's going to be a psycho. And your husband or your wife would cuff you on the back of the head, because what are we supposed to say to kids? Say it out loud. Awesome. How does it make you feel? Tell me about that. I love the kaleidoscope cycle of colors. My son signed up for soccer. I got a dissertation on my behavior. And I wasn't allowed to keep score. I'm still not. My kid's like 10. I'm like, what are you telling me I can't keep score? It's ridiculous. And we all have to clap when the other team scores. I'm like, no wonder. And that's just this one. But anyway. Let me show you one more thing. This is 9 years old. Okay? This is a children's daycare center. Okay? From my hometown. This is a children's daily report. Okay? And I know some of you are like, oh my God, he's going to go there. Ready? Watch this. It's very important that I know exactly when my kid ate and how much. So little Rowan here, that's my daughter's name, bagel with cream cheese, little fair or lots? Lots. Whew, I'm going to be okay. Okay? Now lunch, chicken Greek salad. Who in the hell has chicken Greek salad in daycare anyway? Okay? Rowan only had a little. I'm going to need to go talk to the daycare. I'm going to have to figure out what's going on. I might have to book a medical appointment. Not sure what's going on there. I'll have to Google it. Okay, hang on. PM snack. Bottle at 2:45. Whew, we're doing okay, folks. And little fair, lots, rest time, nap twice. I love they put in the exact time. 10:25 to 11 o'clock, and then 3:10 to 4:10. Whew, gets even better. By the way, let me remind you, this is a daily report. Ready? Bathroom routine. 9:48, I love it, 9:48. Like, what kind of psycho stands there and looks? Ready? What does BM mean? And then 10:20, wet. 2 in one day. My kid is off to the races. This is it, isn't it? Thank you. I'm going to have the next Einstein. Okay? Naomi Campbell, here I come. And the best part, Rowan, my daughter, had a good day. She enjoyed taking toys out of the baskets. That was a struggle for us. She enjoyed spinning the airplane around. She was very happy and had lots to say. Friends were bringing her puppy to her if she left it behind. Stressful. Well, there's always tomorrow, isn't there? They're coming to you very soon. So, no wonder we tell them, you're going to kick ass, you're going to be amazing, we're going to pick you up, we're going to drop you off. And they turn into this amazing group that are very different, very hardwired. And I'll simply say this to my Gen Xers and to my boomers in the room. Before you judge this amazing group, let me just ask you one simple, single question. Who raised them? So, whether you like it or not, social networking is here to stay and it's going nowhere. Accept it. I won't even argue it. I hinted at this. If you are still using mediums, documentation, and technology designed for an older generation, you are losing. Maybe you're doing okay, I'm not here to judge. But let me just put it this way, a missed opportunity. They love to collaborate. We have designed schools, pods, interaction, feel good, kumbaya. It's all amazing. Isolation doesn't work for this group. If they're not connected virtually, they're connected in their groups. What an incredible opportunity for healthcare and providing. The single one-to-one business model is dying. I don't mean that in a negative way. It might not happen today, but I can't help but notice it. And if you think, with utmost humor and respect, because you know the most, that is why they should listen. Anybody ever heard of YouTube? How many of you go onto YouTube to to learn something, to do something. Put your hand up. How many of you? Case closed. So don't get me wrong. Knowledge is very important, but this group, they're like, yeah, I appreciate that. But you know there's this physiotherapist out of the States that posts all this stuff online, hey, for free. And it's phenomenal. And my friends are all connected through him or her. And they just rave. So they all come over to my house, and we put it up on our big screen, and we chat away and do the workouts. And we love it. And we're on our phones the whole time too. So, I love this as I wrap up this presentation. We're very quick to judge, aren't we? It's normal, it's human evolution. But I think what a great way of just kind of bringing it all together is when you see that client walk in the door, no matter what age they are, or if you're a leader and you're quick to think about a different age group, just remember this with humor. Every generation had a bad rap. Boomers in this room, I know you don't like this. You were the dirty hippies. You grew your hair long. You dropped out of society, and let's be honest, and make sure you can turn the video off for what I'm about to say. You dropped who knows what down your throat. You smoked who knows what. You drank heaven forbid knows what. And you did a lot of other interesting things. You stuck flowers in guns. You raged against the establishment. You got shot at. You protested the wars. No generation has ever done that. And your parents or traditionalists thought you were doomed. And if I read this correct, I love this. This was called the Atlantic. I don't think it did survive, did it? Ready?
No, it's online now.
Online. See, they learned. Look at this. The boomers' last chance. They ruined everything. But they can still be the greatest. Gen X. You're a bunch of slackers. You're going nowhere. Really. Gen Y. Spoiled. Lack of work ethic. Lazy. Not committed. Don't buy in. You know what's fascinating, traditionalists, if there's any of you in this room? What was the Roaring 20s? The cantinas? The dancing? The sneaking off at nighttime? Every generation. What's different today is this thing called the internet and longevity of humans, meaning you have traditionalists, you have boomers, you have Xers, you have Ys, and this new generation coming up, which are different. And any of you have young kids in high school, and you're like, oh my goodness, you're doomed. They're coming to a place near you. So here's what I think. Here's what I think. This is having fun and respect. Never forget how you were raised. Subconsciously, the research is through the roof. A large part of the decisions you make and how you judge people, good, bad, and ugly, the Clint Eastwood, is heavily influenced on how you were raised. I'm not here to judge that. Just make sure you're sensitive to that. Don't believe the hype. Look at those magazine covers. So inaccurate. But we do. We're like, right away, we write them off. Look for what is similar. Think about that. There is connection pieces in your workplace. There's a lot of good stuff there. Obviously, the strengths and gifts. And I love this. You can't force it. I call this tsunami. Call it massive change. You can't control this. All you can do is create opportunities. You have no choice. Remember? I showed you those stats. It's incredible. I love this. If you are not too sure and you can't connect, or if you're getting customers or clients that don't buy in, why don't you take half your day, take someone, one of them out for coffee, and say to them, help me understand. And if you're working with a fellow Gen Y or a baby boomer and you're like, dude, you suck. Why don't you say, hey, Mike, Lisa, want to go for coffee? I'm struggling here. Give me some help. It's very powerful. It's like untapped potential. And last but not least, again, not me, this change has just begun. Thank you.